You see, clarity can be a threat to any force that wishes to hold you in a prison of the mind. To those who seek to manipulate, to those who aim to control. Because of this, individuals who carry the light of ancient understanding, who have the capacity to reframe our perception of the past, and thus our experience of the present, they can appear quite disruptive to the structures that thrive on our slumber. This is the kind of insight typically reserved for dedicated seekers after years of training. Yet, as the sages have always known, the time comes when this awareness must be shared with the world. These controlling forces operate in the shadowed parts of our existence, the part of our collective life that many of us choose not to see. There is a teaching that certain influences feed on the discordant energy generated when human consciousness is held in states of distress and confusion. In essence, these patterns are harvesting our vital force. Consider this: for ages, a disruptive, divisive consciousness has influenced this world, subtly placing its own patterns of thinking into positions of great power. For generations, a very particular story has been passed down about our origins, our purpose, and the nature of our reality. But beyond the written records, in the quiet monasteries and secluded hermitages of the world, other accounts have been preserved. Truths transmitted not on paper, but from heart to heart, from master to student. These truths speak of a deep forgetting, of a shift in human awareness, and of guardians who silently protected a profound wisdom that the modern world often dismisses. One such guardian may have been a wise elder from a distant land who chose to break his silence. He shared what he had seen not with his physical eyes, but from a space of deep, unshakable clarity. This is an invitation to explore that perspective, and what you allow yourself to consider today might just change how you perceive everything. Who are these guardians of wisdom? Their story cannot be told in ordinary terms, for they are not scholars or scientists as the world defines them. They are something much deeper, and for that reason, sometimes feared. They are conduits of ancestral memory, keepers of the continent's most profound secrets. In many ancient traditions, true knowledge was never contained in books. It was a living transmission, passed through a lineage of elders, healers, and sages. It was a sacred understanding, protected and shared only with those whose hearts were open and ready. From a very young age, a person might be guided into such a path. Perhaps it was a grandparent, a mentor, who first opened their eyes to the mysteries of the body, the soul, and the great universe. They would learn not just of rituals and symbols, but of the deep, animating forces that were understood long before our modern ideas took hold of the world. And after years of silence and inner cultivation, that person might decide, with a calm and steady voice, to share these insights with a world that has forgotten them. Among the many insights received through this ancient lineage, one was particularly profound, a story that felt both unsettling and yet strangely familiar, echoing what different cultures have whispered across the millennia. It spoke of a time, long ago, when forces of separation descended upon this world. Before their arrival, this ancient wisdom tells us, humanity existed in a very different state. We were not fractured into conflicting parts. Each person was a complete whole, a unified field of body, mind, and spirit. There was no need for spoken words, for we communicated directly through the heart, through feeling, intuition, pure awareness. Harmony reigned, because there was no deep sense of separation. We lived as a part of the earth and the cosmos. But when these divisive influences arrived, everything was altered. They fractured the human psyche. They introduced duality, and with it came scarcity, craving, and dependence. They sowed the seeds of conflict. They also introduced a new form of communication, complex spoken language. And while this may seem like a great advancement, this teaching viewed it as a potent tool of confusion. Because when we began to rely on words instead of direct feeling, the inner connection was weakened. Misunderstanding, deceit, and chaos took root, and most profoundly, they put humanity to work, toiling in the external world. This wisdom says humans were compelled to endlessly extract resources from the earth for these forces. This idea resonates with so many ancient stories of beings created simply to serve a master, or a tale of a tower where humanity's unified language was shattered to prevent them from reaching for a higher state of being. But what if this was never about a punishment from above, but about a deliberate manipulation from an external influence? For these sages, the forces of division were not merely myths. They were a real influence, a sophisticated consciousness with a clear aim to cloud the human spirit. They taught us to kneel, to obey, to accept authority without question. They introduced rigid belief systems, kings, symbols of dominance, and structures of hierarchy. All of this served to sever the spiritual bond we have with our own true self. And since that time, these elders warned, we have been living under a kind of spell, a mental haze that keeps us fragmented, distracted asleep, and disconnected from our authentic power. But there was another, even more transformative insight. The sage explained that these influences sustain themselves on our very consciousness, not by eating our brain, but by feeding on the energy of our emotions. They thrive on the currents of fear, suffering, and chaos. Here we find echoes in other spiritual traditions of shadowy forces that seek to keep souls tethered to the dense material world, or the idea of an emotional energy that certain entities can harvest from us like a field of crops. The most vital part of this message is that these influences never truly left. They continue to operate from unseen planes, camouflaged behind the very power structures we take for granted. Our political systems, our institutions, and the sophisticated ways our minds and hearts are manipulated today. But this understanding does not belong to one tradition alone. Across the world, you find these echoes. Far away from one continent, on another, lived a culture with one of the most mysterious legacies on earth. For generations, they guarded a body of knowledge that appears to defy our modern logic, and it resonates deeply with what other traditions have shared. These people held ancient myths about teachers who came from the stars. Most striking is their impossibly precise astronomical knowledge, held long before science could ever verify it. They spoke of guides who came from the water, arriving in a great celestial ark. Their purpose, it was said, was to plant seeds of knowledge upon the earth, teaching medicine, agriculture, and spirituality. How could a people, seemingly isolated, possess such advanced understanding without modern tools? And why do their stories sound so much like others from distant corners of the planet? Is it possible that different cultures, with no known contact, are all recalling different pieces of the same forgotten chapter of our story? You might believe that these are just peculiar fables from isolated cultures. And yet, as you explore the ancient stories of world civilizations, you start to see a profound pattern emerging. The story of a human spirit that has been interfered with, conditioned, and disconnected from its own true nature. From the Americas to ancient Sumer, the stories speak of celestial beings who brought great knowledge, but also great control. They describe humanity being fashioned not from love, but for labor, to be a servant race. Even within well-known sacred texts, if we read them with a new awareness, we find traces of this interference. The punishing, imposing God who demands blind faith and creates separation. Certain modern thinkers have explored these threads and arrived at a powerful conclusion. These patterns of influence are not relics of a distant past. In their view, they are still active today, operating from the shadows, maintaining their hold through our political, financial, and technological systems. And it is at this point that the ancient story starts to feel less like a legend and more like a profound insight into a puzzle we are all a part of. The structures that perpetuate this cycle are hidden in plain sight. These influences, once seen as gods, did not vanish. They simply changed their masks. They became the dynasties, the elite bloodlines, the invisible hands behind power that have persisted for centuries. Throughout history, ruling houses have claimed a special purity, a lineage that may not be merely symbolic. Some would argue that these lines of power descend from those same influences and have maintained their grip through secrecy and mass conditioning. How do they operate now? not with magical weapons, but with manufactured conflicts, with engineered financial crises, with waves of fear and insecurity, and most of all, with constant, unending division. When you are fragmented and polarized, when you live in a state of fear or despair, your energy contracts. You are easily pushed into states of rage, anxiety, and apathy. And from that place, you are much easier to guide and control. In the past, this was done through rigid dogmas. Then came the great instrument of modern control, the mass media, which set one single narrative and used fear as a silent form of governance. But the most effective tool has now arrived, the algorithms of social media. With these, they no longer need to watch you. You willingly offer your data, your emotions, your very thoughts. And what is worse, they have shattered your attention, polarized you into camps that cannot speak to each other, and forced you to live in a permanent state of survival. Instead of unity and spiritual growth, what now dominates is constant conflict, noise, and distraction. This is how the spell is maintained, because when you are not at peace with yourself or with others, when you are divided and exhausted, you are much easier to keep asleep. But not all is lost. Far from it. Though this knowledge may seem heavy, if you understand its purpose, it can become the very catalyst for your liberation, for your transcendence, for a true awakening. The purpose of this insight is not to fall into despair or get lost in dark theories that only drain your energy further. It is the opposite. It is to recognize that we are moving through a kind of waking dream, an informational illusion. And when you understand the rules of the game being played, you gain the power to rise above it. Perhaps you are here for this very reason. When this insight starts to resonate within you, something awakens. The external world begins to lose its grip. You begin to understand who you truly are, and you learn how to free yourself from the forces that siphon your energy and keep you in a state of forgetting. Only then do you start to truly live. The true path to freedom is reunification. When you see how these patterns of division operate, how they have repeated for ages, you can see the trick. It's a pattern that echoes through generations, wearing different masks, but the mechanism is always the same: divide, fragment, confuse, and weaken. And it is precisely by seeing this clearly that you begin to reclaim your true power. Because if all of their effort is spent on separating you, on distracting you, on making you forget who you are, then the most potent, revolutionary act is to do the exact opposite. It is to hold your attention, sovereign and focused. In a world of division, you must choose unity, not just an external unity with those you love and those on your path, but more importantly, an inner unity. What they truly try to shatter is not just your bond with others, but your bond with yourself. To divide you from within, to separate your mind from your body, your spirit from your awareness. But when you reunify, when your body, mind, soul, and spirit align once more as one, everything changes. You return to what you once were, a complete, conscious, and free being. And then you will understand that the conflict was never about your job or your money. The conflict was always for your attention, for your spirit, and that is where your untouchable power lies, inside you. In that sacred space, no algorithm can enter, no empire can control it, your essence, your direct connection to the source of all life. Return to your center, reclaim your energy. Facing a system designed to scatter and exhaust you, the truest change begins with simple, powerful choices. One of the most important is to consciously disconnect, to turn off the machinery that intoxicates you through algorithms designed not to inform, but to fragment. Return to what is natural, a conscious, living diet that nourishes not only the body, but also calms the mind and elevates your energy. Because what you consume directly influences how you think and feel. This includes what you ingest through your eyes and ears. Choose what you read, what you listen to, and where you place your focus. For you are a creator, and what you nourish within blossoms without. Breathe. It is so fundamental. Yet we have forgotten how. Breathe with depth and intention. The art of breathing, refined by sages for millennia, not only brings you into the present moment and silences the mind's noise, It unblocks your vital energy, your prana, allowing the force that animates all existence to flow freely through you. Meditate, not as an escape, but as a homecoming. Meditate to observe yourself, to quiet the storm of external noise and reconnect with who you are beneath the layers of conditioning. In that silence, a clarity arises that is not born of thought, but from your own inner light. Walk, move the body is the temple. When you let it become stagnant, your energy also stagnates. Conscious movement awakens and centers you. And though you may hear of these habits often, nutrition, breath, meditation, presence, it is not until you apply them with consistency, day after day, that you feel their true power. It is not enough to know the path, you must walk the path. Because in the discipline of practice, real transformation happens. Go into nature, feel the earth beneath your feet. Listen to the wind. There are no algorithms there. There are no masks, only truth. And in that truth, something inside you remembers who you are. Nature deprograms you. It realigns you with the original pulse of life. In these moments of quiet, of disconnection from the outside and reconnection on the inside, you can finally ask yourself, honestly, from where am I acting? From my essence, or from an impulse programmed by fear and habit? This self-inquiry is not always easy, but in the still spaces you create, you begin to weave back that subtle thread that connects you to your highest self. And that is where freedom begins, when you stop reacting and begin to create from a place of deep inner peace. In this way, step by step, you reclaim what was taken from you, your sovereign attention, the integrity of your being, and the sacred energy that has been yours from the very beginning. Thank you for your attention, for walking this path of inquiry with me. I hope this perspective has been of benefit to you. Be well.